Hi, this is Kerry with Learn DaVinci Resolve. We've got a hardware review for you today. And what is it? It is the Polar Pro ND filter kit for the Osmo Action. This happens to be the Cinema Series Shutter Collection 5-pack. So it's got a good selection of filters in here, and they are for, like I said, the Osmo Action. But let's take a step back first. And why do we need ND filters on the Osmo Action? You know, it's an action cam, right? Are we really trying to get good cinematic shots with it? Well, let me take a few moments and explain the whys behind ND filters if you don't already know. You know, for adjusting our exposure, we have three values, right? Our ISO, our shutter speed, and our aperture. Well, in the case of the Osmo Action, there is no aperture. It's simply wide open. Now, to get the best looking cinematic footage, we want to adhere to what's called the 180-degree rule. And what that really boils down to is whatever frame rate you're shooting at, you want double that for your shutter speed. So for example, if we're shooting at 24 frames per second, we want to be as close to 1/48th of a second shutter speed. If we're shooting at 60 frames per second, we want to be 120 shutter speed, 1/120th, and so on. So if we're outside and it's a bright day, we always want our ISO to be as low as possible, and we're going to if it's outside for sure, right? We're going to drop the ISO down to 100, and we're going to adhere to that 180-degree rule. So let's just say we're shooting 24 frames per second. On the Osmo Action, the closest we can get to 1/48th is going to be 1/50th of a second. Well, on a bright sunny day, that's going to be radically overexposed, maybe 6 stops or even more, depending on where you're at. Here in Colorado, that can be a lot. I mean, since we have no aperture to adjust, the only thing we can adjust is the shutter speed. We could end up shooting at 1/2500th or even 1/3000th of a second shutter speed. Well, why does this matter? Well, if we take our individual frames, and if we're using the 180-degree rule, that image is going to take up the duration of that frame. So the amount of time the shutter is open is going to be one frame. And so from one frame to the next frame to the next frame, there's no gap in between. Therefore, we get a nice motion blur effect from frame to frame, giving us the appearance of very, very smooth footage. When we start shooting at a very fast shutter speed, the shutter opens and closes, and then we have a delay before the next time it opens and closes, and a delay before the next time it opens and closes. Well, if there's things that are moving, especially quickly in the scene, that's going to create a jump. The playback is therefore going to look really jittery. It's going to look jumpy. It's going to look like it's struggling to play back. There's things like that. Now, sometimes you can use that for creative impression, like some of the scenes in Saving Private Ryan were shot in that kind of a style, because it just adds to the kind of the grittiness feel of the war that's going on. So you can use it creatively, but as a rule, and you know, of course, rules can be broken if you know how, you want to stick to that 180-degree rule. So since we can't adjust the aperture, since there isn't one, the only way to get that exposure down is to block the amount of light going into the camera. And the way we do that is with neutral density filters. They simply cut down the amount of light going into the camera, allowing us to achieve that perfect 180-degree shutter rule. So, why Polar Pro filters? Well, there's numerous ND filters on the market, even already for the Osmo Action. And it's very simple because of the threaded design that's on here to create them. Cheaper filters are simply made cheaper. Sometimes they'll have a single coating on it or only a couple coatings on them. The Polar Pro filters have 16 coatings on them. Now, what that really means to you is that it's going to work with the light better. You're not going to see the glare coming in. You won't see somewhat like flaring going on as much that you will on a filter that doesn't have as many coatings on it. Now, we also have excellent color profiles on these. They're very, very neutral, which is what a neutral density filter should be. Cheaper ones will often have some color cast, a blue or a green or a magenta kind of color. Now, usually that's very easy to fix in post by adjusting the white balance, but as perfectionists, often we want to get everything right in camera. So if we can have an ND filter that's not adding problems such as glare or reflections, and it's not causing color problems, we have less work to do in post. So it does pay to pay more for good filters. Now, what's special about these filters? And before I get into it, I'm going to tell you that I was having a discussion with Jeff Overall, the CEO over at Polar Pro, about these. And I told him, once I had these in my hand, I told him, this is, to me, the most impressive product Polar Pro has ever made. So, big things to live up to. So let's get right into it. Now, one of the key features of the Osmo Action that sets it apart from the GoPro is this removable lens cover. On the GoPro, that's all fixed. So if you crack that lens cover, you're sending it in for a fairly expensive replacement. If you crack this lens cover, this replacement is $19. So very, very inexpensive to replace this lens cover. But it also means it comes off. The Polar Pro kit, as we see, has an ND4, 8, 16, 32, and 64. So a fantastic range for this camera. It also has this little ring in it. So we're going to take this ring and install it on the Osmo Action. Now, this is the part that has the threads. The filters themselves do not have threads. They have magnets. So to install the filter, once that base is on, we simply put it on and it's good to go. So, I mean, swapping it as your lighting changes is pulling it off, popping a new one on. Super simple. It also saves on manufacturing costs because they don't have to machine those tiny threads into every single filter. You have one base and you have these magnetic mounts. Now, first question I had, how strong are these magnets? Are they going to come off? Well, I have yet to be able to knock one of these off. It takes some decent pressure to take this off. Now, maybe in a hard crash or something, it might pop off, but in your normal use on a mountain bike, motorcycle, things like that, these are not coming off. They're extremely secure. I would have no qualms about mounting this on anything with these filters attached. So that is a big, big win. The ease at which I can swap the filters out as my lighting conditions change and not have to really worry about it. This past weekend, we had a ton of cloud cover and it would come and go and come and go, and the light was literally changing every couple minutes. And if I didn't have this type of a system on here, unscrew, 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 take the next one, screw it, screw it, screw it, screw it. Now it's just like reach in, pull a new one out, pop it on. I'm back up and shooting in just a few seconds. So I absolutely love this design. I think they did a brilliant job on it. So let's talk about cost. The cost on these, they're not cheap. I'll tell you right up front, they're not cheap. They're $129.99. So there are much cheaper filters on the market. And as I said, you get what you pay for when it comes to ND filters. You can watch any YouTube video on ND filter comparisons, and you will see very, very clearly cheap ones are not worth it. Gerald Undone has done some. He's done just recently finished a big comparison of different ND filters, and he found out that the Polar Pro and I believe the B&H were some of the top rated filters, and guess what? They were some of the most expensive. So you do get what you pay for. If you're just a hobbyist, if you're just screwing around, maybe you don't need to spend this kind of money on the filters if you're not really into the color grading and really trying to get the most out of your image. But I think for the people who are watching this channel, they're filmmakers. And if you're serious about your filmmaking, you're serious about getting your image right. And if you're serious about getting your image right, you need the right products. And in this case, for the Osmo Action, the right product is from Polar Pro. So that's my take on the Polar Pro Cinema Series shutter collection for the Osmo Action. I think if you're serious about your stuff and you have an Osmo Action, this is the only kit to buy. And yes, they do make a 3-pack that has a 4.8/16. I don't feel that that is going to fit most people's needs, because in the bright daylight where you're using an action cam, you're not shooting an action cam typically at night or in low light. It's in the middle of the day, out motorcycling, off-roading, surfing, skiing, whatever. It's going to be very bright. You need to cut down that light. So you're going to need the bright or the darker filters, the 32 and the 64. And that's why I recommend the 5-pack. Now, I'm going to give you a special deal on these things. If you go to multicopterwarehouse.com and you put in discount code LDR for Learn DaVinci Resolve, you must be logged into an account, make sure of that. I'll make sure that you get 5% off on your purchase. So enjoy that, enjoy the discount, and if you have an Osmo Action, go and do yourself a favor, get the Polar Pro filters. You will not regret it. They are worth every single penny. This has been Kerry with Learn DaVinci Resolve. Thanks for watching. Catch me on Mondays and Fridays for regular videos, and as often as I can for reviews on Wednesdays. Thanks for watching, everyone. Appreciate all the subscribers. Check that bell icon to get notified whenever a new video comes out. And as always, I'll catch you later. Bye-bye.